That's perfect.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you tonight. This talk was originally given at Donegal Historical Society back in 2019. And between 2018 and 19, I was working on a very exciting project, reconstructing the fine 17th century mansion at Castle Caulfield. And it all started when it took a wee run over to look at the castle. And I hadn't been really since I was a child. And I was really struck at the beauty of the ruins. And I sort of thought to myself, well, what if this could actually be digitally constructed? What if you could walk through it, literally going back in time? And tonight is the result. I do hope you get a lot out of it. It's been really fun doing it, and certainly the research hasn't stopped since I gave the first talk by any means. In this presentation, I want to give you a bit of context on why the castle was built in the first place, and then show you some of the research involved in investigating the castle to understand what it would have looked like, to give you as much insight as possible into what the castle was about. And then we'll tour the castle and discover what it looked like 400 years ago. So when was Castle Caulfield built? Castle Caulfield was built during the Ulster Plantation. This was one of the most important events in Ulster's history. The main objective of the Ulster Plantation was to replace an old Irish way of life with an English way of life. Castle Caulfield was a manor house for the new town at Ballydonnelly and its estate. But why was Ireland planted? Well, when the Normans conquered Ireland in AD 70, Ireland became English territory. However, by the 1600s, England had lost direct control over much of the island. Ireland had become a liability. It was vulnerable to invasions from France or Spain, who could use it as a base to attack England. There were suspicions that native chieftains were planning to rebel and take Ireland for themselves. A way to stabilise Ireland was through planting English and Scottish citizens to introduce a British way of life. Ireland at this time was also rich in resources, particularly wood, which was really the wonder material of the time. It was needed for fuel, for packaging, for building. And Britain and England, particularly England at this time, was very overpopulated and under-resourced. There were several failed plantations across Ireland in the 1500s. The English crown began to exercise control over Ulster at this time. This led to a bitter 9-year war against the native chieftains. It ended with a truce in 1603. However, in 1607, the most powerful chieftains, the Earl of Tyrone in Dungannon and the Earl of Tyrconnell, fled to Europe for support. This flight of the Earls meant Ulster was now free to plant with British citizens from England and Lower Scotland. Sir Toby Caulfield was granted 1,000 acres around Castle Caulfield as a servitor. The land was previously owned by the O'Donnellys, a powerful family well connected to the O'Neill chieftains at Dungannon. Caulfield built a town here and a grand manor house known today as Castle Caulfield. Toby Caulfield built the castle at Castle Caulfield and was finished at around about 1619. He was born in Oxfordshire, England in 1565. Toby Caulfield was a career soldier with the English Army and served under notable military officers in his youth. He fought as an officer in the Lowlands, which is now Holland, and Spain. In 1598, he was posted to Ireland during the 9 Years' War to fight native chieftains resisting English interference. Caulfield fought at the Battle of Kinsale in 1601. He was left in charge of a fort at Charlemont in County Armagh, and for his service, Toby Caulfield was knighted by King James I in 1603. The Ulster Plantation made Sir Toby Caulfield very successful. In January 1610, he was granted 1,000 acres of land around what is now Castle Caulfield village. By 1619, he had 15 families settled in the town. And over the following decades, Caulfield vastly extended his estate across Ulster. By 1626, he had 25,000 acres and patents to all the mountains in Ulster. In 1613, he was appointed to the Irish Parliament. Caulfield was also involved in administrative roles, including Master of the Ordnance and parcelling out confiscated lands. Sir Toby died in 1626, so only about 6 or 7 years after the castle was finished. He never married, and his estate passed to his nephew, William Caulfield. The castle at Castle Caulfield was built as a centre for his vast estate. He also had a townhouse in Dublin for his governmental roles and a house in Charlemont for his military duties. So he wasn't living in Castle Caulfield full time, and he probably split his time throughout the 3 properties in Dublin, Charlemont, and Castle Caulfield.
Mute my audio.
And we know from a survey that work started on Castle Caulfield in 1611. It was in an enviable position, about 3 miles from Dungannon. A new plantation town was built there in Dungannon, and it was named as the capital town of Ulster. Castle Caulfield is a typical Elizabethan manor house, built to accompany a Ballydonnell town. The castle was, as I mentioned, Caulfield's base for his vast estates, and the ruins have medieval, Dutch and Renaissance influences. And the castle was built during an architectural watershed moment in British architecture. Manor houses were evolving from an irregular sort of chunky medieval style to a more refined style that we would recognise today. And by 1619, we know from a survey that the castle was very near completion. It was built with local limestone, and recycled materials were used too. Remains of a medieval beam were discovered, which was dated to the 13th century. And the exterior was probably rendered with lime plaster and whitewashed. The coinstones were probably painted black to stand out, and it also had a slated roof, which was a luxury for any 17th century homeowner. In the bawn, there were timber houses for workers and offices for Toby Caulfield, and there was also a stables with a loft for storing corn. Okay. And given the status of Toby Caulfield, upon entering, visitors would have seen a house nicely decorated with wooden panels and furniture to match. This stylish castle was built to make a statement to visitors. So Toby Caulfield was in command, and you were on his estate, and it's ways always to know who you're dealing with. The castle didn't last long though. It was burnt in the summer of 1642 during the 1641 rebellion by MacDonald, a Scottish mercenary with close ties to the O'Neill chieftains. So Castle Caulfield only lasted in its full glory for about 20 years. It seems to have been re-inhabited to some extent, but was burnt again sometime between 1688 and 1691. The gatehouse, though, was later occupied by the local yeomanry, who were an early police force, and the Caulfield family's rent collector. By 1641, Castle Caulfield was owned by Toby Caulfield, 2nd Viscount Charlemont. Toby Caulfield was captured at Charlemont Fort and held in the basement of the governor's house with his family. He was later shot by rebels at Kennard whilst under captivity, moving safe houses. Castle Caulfield was partially re-inhabited by the Caulfields after the rebellion. The house was burnt again during the Williamite War and abandoned for good by 1690. The gatehouse was rebuilt in the 1700s, and that's the gatehouse that we see today. Okay. So just here's a short timeline just to show what's involved in making one of these digital reconstructions, and it'll reflect the layout of the talk. So first, if you're making a model like this, you want to be looking at the evidences before you. So looking at castle ruins, written accounts, and also evidence in pictures or engravings. Then you maybe will want to extend your research. Look at other examples in Ireland and Britain. For me, it involved trips to Galway and Leitrim, which was fun. Particularly, that was for looking at architectural styles. Then you want to take everything together and work out the interior layout of the castle. And that includes just researching the interior decoration as well at that time. Okay. So, as I said, we are lucky to have clues in the ruins. We're very lucky that the ruins are there. We're missing most of the third story and the whole wing though. The wing was apparently used as cannon practice by the French on their way to the siege of Derry. So you're going to be looking for architectural evidence, like windows. I don't know if you can see my mouse. Decorative stone. Okay. And also evidence of locked up doorways and windows. Okay. An academic called Job studied the ruins in 1958, and that his survey helped a lot. But we'll get to that later. We also want to be looking at contemporary accounts. There were several surveys written in Castle Caulfield as it was being built, notably in 1619 and 1622. The surveyor in 1619, and a man called Captain Piner, described it as the first I have yet seen. He was doing a survey throughout the planted counties of Ulster at that time. So it does tell you that it was a particularly grand house. And the two surveys identify the dimensions of the castle when it was built. A bawn, 180 foot squared. It identifies the buildings with their dimensions. It identifies the gatehouse, and it mentions that it has an iron gate and a heavy door, stables with a corn loft, and houses for workers and timber framed houses for offices. Houses like these. This is typical of the original houses at the house, but also at Castle Caulfield town. It's in English, a timber style. There were two found in Coleraine behind masonry. I think maybe in the 1980s. They're since gone. But there was a serious problem with these timber houses in Ulster, because the climate tends to be a lot drier in England. And what they found after a couple of years in Ulster, because the climate here is a lot wetter, they were starting to rot. And actually in Coleraine town, there was a city or town statute made that basically banned them building these timber houses and told them to build them out of stone instead. So I'm not sure how long the timber houses lasted at the bawn in Castle Caulfield. This is a typical plantation town at Balahay in County Derry, Londonderry. Castle Caulfield would have been like this. You can see how our castle would have fitted into its landscape. Okay, and you can see here, if you can see my mouse, it's a street of timber framed houses, and you have a bond manor house up at the top. Okay, and most settlements had a church and a mill nearby, and we know from the surveys of Castle Caulfield that there was definitely a mill at the town. There probably was a church. Certainly during at the start of the plantation, anyway. The castle. This is a typical English town. If you were to go in the 17th century over to Oxford or anywhere in England, this layout is what you would find. And the castle is very much a statement in Castle Caulfield of an introduction of a British way of life. So as I mentioned there, when reconstructing the castle, you also want to be looking at modern surveys and archaeology. And this is a scale drawing of the ruins of Castle Caulfield, which was crucial to the reconstruction. It shows on the exterior a typical U-shaped Elizabethan mansion, 3 stories plus cellars. The footings of the opposite wing are partly identified. The chimney footings are found. Holes in the masonry suggest that there was once a front porch. There's a tradition in the area that St Michael's Castle Caulfield, the decoration on that porch was reused from the castle. Now, Joe says it doesn't fit, but it does. When I went back and measured the decoration and put it on a porch which would fit these footings, it fitted exactly. So I'm not sure if Joe was maybe taking the whole porch, the actual porch itself, and trying to insert it all onto the castle to see if it would fit, or whether he's just taking the decoration of the film, he was taking the whole porch. Because definitely you'll see later the decoration does fit. Okay. Job also identifies a chimney not tied to the ground floor, which is this one on the left. Okay. It covers the cellar windows. So either it was added sometimes later for extra heat and for symmetry at the rear of the property, or it was added after the first floor had been built. Now, I chose not to include it in the reconstruction because I wanted to, as far as possible, to show the castle as it was intended when it was built. So my theory on it is that it was built sometime later, because there seems to be there's a fireplace where the staircase would have been. I think maybe after it was burnt during the 1641 rebellion. The layout may have been changed slightly, and for that reason, the staircase may have been relocated, and the chimney was built then. Job also states that it probably had a wooden screen passage, which is basically a wooden hallway, which you typically find in the 17th century manor house, and a great hall, which was fashionable in some houses. Okay, and yes, and also a back door opposite the screen passage here. Okay, Job identifies the kitchen in the surviving northwest wing because of the huge fireplace. He uncovered a cellar. I think there was a dig in 1958 at the castle at that time. Now, I'm not sure if they got to the bottom of it or if it was a very shallow cellar. Job states that there was no sign of a staircase. It must have been freestanding or partially freestanding, which would have been quite rare at that time. Job also says that the interior is difficult to work out, but in studying similar houses in Ireland and Britain, you can make a confident attempt. So here's Job's reconstruction of Castle Caulfield, which is very accurate, except for the gatehouse. As I stated, the gatehouse, as it was discovered, isn't actually original. But we'll get to that in a minute. The Queen's University also conducted a dig here in 2011. It aimed to find evidence of the O'Donnelly fort and investigate the gatehouse. They did not find evidence of the original O'Donnelly fort. It's thought to be at about a kilometre, about 0.6 miles west of the castle. But they did uncover footings of an earlier gatehouse. Queen's University think that the current gatehouse is probably from the 18th century when the castle was in use by the yeomanry. They also found oyster shells, which is an evidence of wealth. Oyster shells would have been expensive because they had to be imported from the coast. They found animal bone, buttons, window glass, broken pottery, and these are all evidence of occupation on the site. When making a reconstruction like this, it's also crucial to look at preserved or reconstructed examples of other houses built at this time. So on the left is Park's Castle in County Leitrim, and on the right is Ormond's Castle in County Tipperary. Ormond's Castle is 16th century, so it's a wee bit earlier than Castle Caulfield. Park's Castle is 17th century. It dates to roughly about the same time. The big problem with looking at contemporary buildings is that the original buildings are often changed throughout time, so you do need to be careful about filtering out later additions. And this is Portumna Castle in Galway, built about 1617, so it's around about the same time as Castle Caulfield, and it is very similar in style, as you'll see later, particularly the windows and also to a degree the internal layout. And also Dunluce. New research has been conducted into Dunluce within this past 10 years or so. If you haven't been to Dunluce, it's really worth a visit. It's stunning looking. I've heavily referenced Dunluce and Portumna in this reconstruction. Okay. There are some larger houses studied. I'll not bore you with the details, but you might see similarities between these and Joke's reconstruction earlier. They are better preserved than smaller houses that would have been built at this time. Because Castle Caulfield, although it was large, it was by no means the biggest manor house built. But the extravagance that was built with these houses that are on the screen needs to be scaled down a bit because they're much grander builds than what Castle Caulfield would have been. The families who built these houses were eye-wateringly wealthy by today's standards. There's another couple of examples. Plas Teg on the right was built about 1610, so it's about 9 years before Castle Caulfield was completed. Okay. The way these manor houses were fortified in Ireland was that they were enclosed by a bawn. A bawn is a walled enclosure to be used as protection for townspeople and their livestock in case of attack. For most plantation castles, the bawn joined up with the back wall of the house. However, Castle Caulfield seems to be different. Houses with integrated bawn do not seem to have back doors. So if you ever look at Tully Castle in Fermanagh and Money Castle in Fermanagh, the Parish Castle in County Leitrim, the Castle Caulfield does have a back door. Now this left the bawn very vulnerable to attack. So what's the point of having a gatehouse if attackers can get in the back? Now, Portumna Castle, as I just showed earlier, it had a back door, and during archaeological excavations, they covered a bawn wall running along the back of the house. It basically enclosed the castle, went the full way around. Now that would have created problems with light because the bawn is quite high. I think this is also a big clue about the bawn wall as well. This may be the bawn wall at the back. This is an engraving made of the castle sometime before 1630. And cottages appear to straddle the wall. Now, the fact that they're straddling the wall is important because that is quite characteristic of flankers, sort of defensive posts on each corner of the bawn. I think what may have happened is that these flankers have eroded through time, along with the wall, and then at some stage, someone has come along and they've fixed them up and put a roof on them, and created a cottage out of them for domestic use. So that's the outside. Now for the internal layout. This is the ground floor. Now the courtyard would have been here. Visitors would have waited in the courtyard for Toby Caulfield to greet them. They went out of fashion not long after Castle Caulfield was built. The courtyard was also the safest place in the bawn, and it was literally a courtyard within a courtyard. Now there's a mark in the ruins where the courtyard wall has been robbed away from the kitchen wall, and I'm just going to try and show you this. Someone has done a 360-degree survey of the ruins, which is great. If I can work it. No, apologies. Yes, sorry. Do you see the bit of the courtyard wall here? If you're actually looking at the wall head on, you can see also where the wall has been robbed out of the masonry. Okay. There was also a porch, footings of which were excavated in the 1950s. Oops. The decoration on the porch, as I said, in St Michael's Church in the village, is said to have been salvaged from the Castle Caulfield. It was long a local tradition, and it seems to fit. I've put that replica on the Reconstruction model. Now, there's also a Caulfield coat of arms, which is now above the rebuilt gatehouse, which I put on it as well. As you can see, the screen passage that Joke identified in 1958. And there's no fireplace in the Great Hall. Okay, even after the chimney stack was added, the fireplace is on the first floor. So that tells us it's not a functional room, and for this reason, the staircase was probably in this Great Hall. There is evidence for this as well. There are porch windows on the first and second floors, which tended to be as landings and staircases. And the central flight is nicely framed by these two windows. Okay. There's also an area of intense burning on the stonework. When the house burnt in 1641, something large must have been burning against the stone for some time. I think during the fire, the staircase crashed down to the ground floor and burned from ours. Now, Pat O'Neill and Donaghmore Historical Society also made a very good point that the cellar under the staircase would have had spirits stored, which would have added fuel for the fire. The staircase would have been partially freestanding, as I mentioned, which was very rare at the time. Okay, and the parlour, where the business room where rents would have been settled and a business would have been done for the estate, is normally found in the Great Hall, but I think it was in this room. Okay, which is now, this wing is now gone. Now these U-shaped houses also tended to have a staffing on the ground floor, which was probably here. You can also see a closet area here. These timber walls, just along here, would have possibly been resting on beams. You can still see the holes in the walls in the ruins. Now this includes the back staircase to give staff direct access to the entertainment areas and master bedroom above. The upper classes were disgusted at the smell of food, of cooking at this time, and this closet area would have acted as an extra barrier to prevent the smell wafting to other areas of the house. The Castle Caulfield is very rare in that the kitchen has been identified at the front of the house. I've only ever seen one example in these U-shaped houses. That was in Wales. It was in a house of a similar size to Castle Caulfield that was demolished in the 1960s, I think. Okay. Now, this room may have been a staff common room, but after I give the original talk, I'm starting to think that it might have actually have been a waiting room for business guests, because there's a hole in the masonry where the stone surround has been removed, and a mullioned doorway like that is just too expensive to be used in the staff area. Now, Richard Hosks, who's listening tonight, suggested that it was customary to have a space for important visitors to wait ahead of meeting Sir Toby to do business, which ensured visitor privacy. And I think this room may have been some sort of a waiting room. And it might go some way to explaining why the kitchen was pushed here, because you have a direct flow from the waiting room through the great hall and into the parlour, whereas if the kitchen was put to the back, it just wouldn't work if Toby Caulfield wanted a waiting room included in the build. This is the typical 17th century staircases. The one on the right is from Plas Teig staircase, and the one on the left is from a place called Plas Newid in Wales. The one on the right was rediscovered a few years ago. It had been put into storage in the 1960s when the house was knocked down. You'd be doing well to lose a staircase, but it is possible apparently. There is evidence of the intense area of burning, and this is it. Okay, this is the stone that I was talking about that burned red hot with the rest of the building. There's something, as I said, had to be burning against this for a period of time, and it probably, I think it was the staircase that collapsed that was sitting above it basically during the 1641 fire into the cellar. Okay, and this arch, you can see the start of here, would have been built to provide structural support to strengthen the wall for the cellar below. And you can see on the left, you just faintly see an outline. You see the bottom mullion for a posh window, quite an ornate window. And there's a reconstruction picture of it, which I think would have framed, or would have. You tend to find those sort of style of windows at landings on staircases in manor houses at this time. And this is St Michael's porch that I was talking about. The wall, and you can see there the decoration on the porch. And to the right, this wall has been lowered during restoration work. It wasn't there originally, because you can see up at the very top. So you can see the beams for the holes for the beams for the floors. If you look at the top of the very top of the masonry, it seems unlikely there was a window there because that's far too short a gap. Now that would have worked if it was a waiting room, because it's people arriving in the bond via the gatehouse wouldn't have been able to sneak a glimpse to see who's in the house to do business with Sir Toby Caulfield. And on the first floor, the main living quarters were on this floor. You would expect to see a banqueting hall here. Banqueting halls are the most impressive room of the house and used for dining and big meals. It's the biggest room on this floor and also has the most impressive windows. Okay, there's a quadruple window here and a triple window here. Okay, it's just the nicest area of the house. This may have been here a private room for family, for Toby Caulfield, or it may have also been a guest bedroom This private room and the guest bedroom above may have been switched. It may have been the other way around. Okay. And then also in a house this size, you'd expect to see a withdrawal room. It was fashionable at this time to retire to a cozier room after your meal. And this is a forerunner for the drawing room found in big houses. Okay, that's where the language it evolved from withdrawal room to drawing room. And there were examples of drawing rooms in Dunlees, in Portumna as well. And you can see here how the back staircase is giving servants access to the main entertainment areas and master bedroom from the servants' wing. Okay. Because, sorry, I should just state the master bedroom was probably above the banqueting hall. Now, there's also in the ruins this very interesting carving, a piece of carved stone. I think it's from a carved fireplace, possibly. I mean, if it is, it's quite a big fireplace. It probably was in the banqueting hall. So it's a piece from this area of the fireplace. This is the fireplace in Donegal Castle, which was this wing of the fireplace is in. Donegal Castle was built around about the same time as Castle Caulfield. By Donegal Castle, the fireplace there is particularly ornate, so it's unlikely that Castle Caulfield, certainly there's no evidence the fireplace in Castle Caulfield was as ornate as Donegal Castle, but it would have been of a similar shape. Okay, on the second floor, you probably would have found the bedrooms, a master bedroom and a secondary bedroom here and here, and also probably some sort of withdrawal room or office here. It may have also been used as a third bedroom. Now you'll also notice that there's a closet area here. Closet areas were common in houses at this time. They were used for private activities like going to the toilet, hence the reason. Hence where the word to go to the closet comes from, and also possibly for prayer and things like that. The bedrooms would have been much more simply decorated. There were more functional areas than other rooms. Now, as I said previously, I'm having second thoughts on this. This bedroom may have been actually a family room or a private room. Rather than a bedroom, the bedroom and the family room may have been switched about. I'm just going by example you have seen in other houses. Okay, so I'm going to show you the 3D model now. This is just okay. And when you look at all the evidence, it becomes apparent that Castle Caulfield was a typical Elizabethan style English manor house. The castle was about 12,000 square feet. And it's very much a statement of wealth and power to Toby Caulfield's tenants. Okay, so hopefully this will play for me. There's a bit of text on this because I used this video for the European Heritage Open Days there before COVID. See very clearly a white house with black coin stones, which was typical of hammer houses at this time, would really have stood out in the landscape. The banqueting hall, the most elaborate room of the house. And up the back staircase. So thanks a million for turning out tonight. I really appreciate it. Particular thanks just to Jonathan Gray from Clonelise Historical Society, Paul and Patricia Bogue from Donmore Historical Society, and also to Richard Hawkes, the Caulfield family archivist, for information on this project. Your help with this has been honestly much appreciated. And feel free, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask away.
I would like to know the height of that wall at the back. I mean, I wouldn't imagine there was downstairs windows at the back. I mean, you wouldn't get in any light, would it? It'd be very dark.
Yeah, I think it would have been very dark. There are signs of windows where the windows have been filled in, so there were windows at the back. It would have been quite dark. The only answer I can think of is maybe that they were doing it more for style in terms of putting the windows in the back, and maybe also to let in a bit of light.
And if somebody was sieging you to the front, how would you get out?
People would have probably would have in the Bawn. What would have happened? The Bawn was there for protection. So people would have the townspeople would have come into the Bawn and probably have waited it out basically, or until assistance arrived. You do find that during the 1641 rebellion, I think there were maybe troops. I think I'm not 100% sure. Did actually come to the Bawn. I don't know what the overall picture was, but I know certainly in other instances during the 1641 rebellion, whenever castles were taken over by the rebels, troops did come to assistance as well. So it's basically just a case of basically battening down the hatches and waiting it out.
Yeah, I hope somebody comes. Thank you.
No problem.
Just say, Eoin, that was a fabulous. I've been, I suppose, around the castle 3 or 4 times, but this really brings the castle to life, and I just think it's a wonderful recreation, and I'd be really interested in finding out what Richard thinks of it. Is this your first time of seeing it, Richard?
Yeah, yes. No, I've seen the video before, but I've seen the castle ruins many times, of course. Mm-hmm. This is an incredible work, I think, that Eoin's done, putting all this together. And as you say, it all springs to life. It's amazing. Well done, Eoin.
Thanks very much.
Absolutely.
I did just one tiny little thing. In your talk, one of the family portraits you showed of Toby Caulfield, he was the one who was murdered at the age of 19, was taken away from Charlemont Fort and murdered. He was actually the 3rd Baron, not the 2nd Viscount.
Apologies about that.
2nd Viscount was a good deal later.
Oh, right, okay.
But it's just a point of order, really.
Yeah, no worries. I appreciate that. I do appreciate that.
There is one aspect of it, Eoin. We know from the history of Oliver Plunkett, who was, of course, the Catholic Archbishop of Armagh in the 1670s, that he used the lawn of this house to confirm, I think, up to 5,000 people over a period.
That's right. Yeah.
Goodness. Okay.
He was actually on very good terms with the then Toby Caulfield, who would have been, I'm not sure, Richard, how he fitted in generationally wise from the original builder, but he'd probably been the grandson or great-grandson, or great-nephew or something.
What year are we talking about, Brendan?
I think it was around mid-1670s.
Yes, that would have been either the 1st Viscount or the 2nd Viscount. 1st Viscount died in 1671, I think,
right,
from memory. So it was either he or his son, both William.
No, it was an interesting. What's the word I'm looking for? An interesting historical event in that, Oliver Plunkett was a worldly man, very well travelled, a man of several languages and so on and so forth. He would have been on the same intellectual level as many of the nobility and aristocracy at the time, and obviously made friends quite easily with them. And it was a huge surprise to us to find out that this convivial relationship existed, only to be followed, of course, some 20, 30 years later by the penal laws, which which totally outlawed Catholicism and everything else in the sad history of this area, But just amazed, Eoin, at the detail you've managed to include in all of this, and appreciation for the way in which this house would have been constructed, which, based on the remains that are currently existing, it would be difficult to envisage it as the way you presented it. So, absolutely well done.
Thanks very much.
Oh yes, agreed. Eoin, do you think it's true to say that Sir Toby, a lot of the design of this house harks back to Toby's youth in Oxfordshire? Do you think he brought a lot of ideas with him?
As far as I understand, this U-shaped, sometimes people refer to an E-shape because of the porch, was particularly popular in Oxfordshire. Oxfordshire. So it probably was, yeah, it was a local, a more local example of a manor house, as far as I can understand, rather than an English manor house. It's a typical Oxfordshire manor house of this thing.
Because I think I'm right in saying that the original Great Milton Manor, where he was born and brought up, did start life as a U-shaped house.
Oh, really?
Although it was much altered later on.
Right, okay.
The two wings were sort of exploded into an Edwardian manor house in around 1880.
Okay.
But the original core of the house is still there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it may well have been a U-shaped manor house itself.
Goodness, right? Okay, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. And have you noticed any? Have you been up at the house itself?
Well,
the original
Great Milton.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I've been there. I had a very expensive lunch there. But no, the old part of the house is very easy to make out from the Edwardian extensions.
Right. Okay. Okay. Right. Goodness. And would you from looking at the ruins, would you have identified any sort of similarities, architectural details that would have been quite similar between that?
Well, on a smaller scale, Great Milton Manor was not actually, I think, as grand as this. It was a family house, only 2 floors, fairly modest. Although it sounds very grand, I don't think it was, and would have been absolutely jam full of people, that's for sure, because there were goodness knows how many children there, and aunts and uncles and cousins and servants and heaven knows what. So Sir Toby was brought up in a very noisy country atmosphere. But it's not quite. It's not as impressive as this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would have a feeling that maybe part of Toby Coffey, he obviously had a large drive about him to succeed. I would wonder if it was because I understand his his paternal line. Were they merchants? Were they?
Oh, his father Alexander was a merchant tailor in the city of London.
Right, okay.
And he moved out to Oxfordshire and rented Great Milton Manor from the Dormer family. The Dormer family had mainly, I think, supported his work as a merchant tailor because the family originally came from the Welsh Marches, of course. They were Welsh, and we think that's where the dragon comes from on the coat of arms. And it's red, what's more. So we think it's a Welsh dragon by origin because they were tremendous supporters of the Tudors and they supported the Tudor resurgency and were very well rewarded for that in terms of land in the Welsh Marches.
Right, okay.
So that they were originally Welsh, I think now. Goodness.
Okay. Okay. And do you think maybe Toby Caulfield was in Ireland in building a big house like this, and given how successful he was, did he see himself, I wonder, as climbing the ladder? Generations, to building status on the family.
They were a sort of, I suppose, what you'd call these days a sort of upper middle class family, but he certainly raised the game during his life.
He was a social climber of his day, Richard, was he?
Well, yes, I suppose you'd have to say that.
Well, I suppose that, he used his military exploits to benefit himself and the family.
Well, he was very
which was in vogue at the time. Of course, that was the way things were done then. Yeah,
absolutely. And he was lucky that in his military career, he fetched up with people like the Earl of Essex, on his escapades around the Spanish waters and the Netherlands. And he obviously did very well and excelled at all that, and it didn't go unnoticed. And in fact, he was specifically requested by the Earl of Essex to accompany him to Ireland in 1599.
Right.
So he was obviously well respected militarily.
I see. I still can't get over how much detail is in that presentation, Owen. I think it's testament to the research that you've done. Fantastic. And someone has made a note there that this should be better published. It should be on the tourist information by the local council. There's no question it should be.
It'd be wonderful to see even well, sorry, there is some at the gate, I think.
Yeah. Well, you'd have to go looking for it. That's the point.
Yeah. I had planned to put this onto a website, but just with funding, with COVID restrictions, funding has just for the grant I was going to apply for, funding isn't available, so it's been shelved for a while anyway. We'll try to do something with it. But it would be great to see it. Something being done.
Eoin, could I ask, could you, well, firstly, congratulations on that work. I've seen this before, but seeing it the second time is better than the first, because I hope of remembering some of the info. But would you remind me just of the acreage? I know we got 1,000 acres donated or whatever at the start, but what did he finish up with?
25,000.
Right.
25,000 acres.
That's a lot of great.
It's a lot of land. He did very well for himself. There was he managed to find and to use a legal loophole to claim a lot of land that would have otherwise have been transferred over to the Anglican Church, which I think helped them build up such a huge estate. It was something to do with, because the land wasn't technically owned by the Irish Church at the time of the Ulster Plantation, that the Anglican Church didn't have a right to automatically be given it automatically. It was something to do with that. It was just a wee loophole that he managed to use to build up the estate.
Brilliant, thank you.
No worries.
So he acquired most of the land through practical nous rather than military.
Well, I'm not sure what extent or how much land he gained through that, just how much of that estate. But he comes across to me as a pretty determined fellow anyway.
Also, it's true to say that a lot of the servitors were very wily people, because a lot of those servitors that were granted their, was it 1,000 acres, wasn't it? 1,000 acres of Ballybough. But they didn't actually want them. They wanted to go back home to England and lead a cosy life. And the likes of Sir Toby went round basically buying all these Ballybows off these other servitors for a knockdown price and adding it to their own estates. So, that way you could build up a vast estate pretty quickly if you had a few pennies.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's true. By the way, a ballybow is the old term for a townland.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for those of our foreign visitors, a townland is usually somewhere between 300 and 750 acres of land. And most of these townlands have names which represent the topography of that particular area. Or a family name associated with the area, in which case Castle Caulfield before Sir Toby came was known as Ballydonnelly, the home of the Donnellys.
Mm.
That's given some background historical context to it.
I'd like to add my appreciation and thanks to Eoin for a wonderful presentation. And I certainly will be looking at Castle Caulfield through new lenses when I pass it now.
Yeah.
Sort of, it didn't really mean a lot, or I had no concept of what it actually would have looked like back then, but under no illusions now, and I know exactly what. As I say, it's an amazing piece of work, really is.
Thanks very much.
Then, from what I hear, you've been very, very interested in ancestry and history, etc., from a very young age.
I fall down rabbit holes. That's what happens. I'll just have a wee look at something, and then all of a sudden I'm just inundated. And
Yeah. Well, once again, thanks a million, Eoin. It really was a great presentation. And again, is there anyone else that would like to ask or contribute?